Hi there, Coach Sage Kende of Vo2max Productions here with another training talk. Today we're going to talk about heart rate training, maximum heart rate, Vo2max, and kind of what goes into that. And I've done a heart rate training moth method, I guess it was labeled, video before, but I'll get into those details later. First of all, I want to thank everyone for all the comments for future training talk topics. Be sure to subscribe. We got a lot of great feedback and votes for the What I Eat in a Day, diet and nutrition and running video. And so I already did film all the footage for that, and it's going to be coming out in the coming days. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. So we'll have some cycling videos, try to get some footage of me out on my bike here in Boulder. And I'm going to talk about cycling a little bit in this training talk as well, because it's applicable to the heart rate training, I think, as a good way to compare to running and other aerobic-based exercise. But yeah, keep the comments coming, keep the votes coming. Thank you so much for sharing this on social media, subscribing. I really do appreciate all the comments, and the diet nutrition component's huge, so that'll be in the next training talk. But today we're going to talk about heart rate training and some of the misconceptions. First of all, I want to plug, I got this Fitbit on, my Fitbit. It's got my pulse going. It's in 74 right now, probably because I'm amped up. But I want to thank Larry for this. Larry gave this to me. It's a great gift, great to keep track of my fitness, and I'm helping coach Larry for the New York City Marathon, and I will say his training is going very well, so thank you, Larry, and keep up the great work. Also, another plug, I'm working at the Estes Trail Ascent, Estes Trail Conference in October 9th, I believe. I'll be there Friday, Saturday, so doing the uphill, downhill trail running clinic, as well as other panels on shoe design. There's going to be a lot of great athletes and runners and coaches and race directors and all sorts of people in the trail running community there. So you can check it out on Estes Trail Ascent. I'll link to the website right there, because I'm not sure if I said it right, but you could still register for that coming up in the coming weeks. But let's get into the training talk. So we have a chapter actually in our book, The Sage Running Secret. You can check it out at sagerunning.com. It's also on Amazon. But there's a chapter called The Myth of Max Heart Rate and the Myth of Vo2max. Myth in parentheses, of course, but I basically start off the chapter saying Vo2max is overrated. And if you don't know what that is, it's your maximum aerobic capacity. Basically, when you're cranking, 100%, something you could hold in maybe a 3K, a 2-mile all-out time trial race, or up to about a 5K if you're running pretty fast and hard. So it's a really high-end output, approaching 100% maximum heart rate. Now we're going to start out for this talk with talking about maximum heart rate. And I know a lot of people do use heart rate for training, a lot of athletes who coach. Myself, I wear a heart rate monitor. If you haven't seen my Strava data, it's on there a lot, and I use it a lot. It's very helpful, even at rest. Keep track of your pulse in the morning. Someone asked me, I think mine's usually in the 40s. It gets better as you get in better shape, but if it's elevated in the morning, it's a good sign of overtraining. So that's one way you could use heart rate as a tool. Now on the max end, max heart rate, most training programs you hear about zone training, there's moth method, our training guidelines with percentages of your maximum heart rate for those targeted zones, basically. So people talk about fat burning zone, they talk about the lactate threshold or anaerobic threshold, you talk about what your moderate, steady endurance base building fat burning zone is, things like that. It's all based on percentages of your 100% maximum heart rate. Now, the fallacy with that, of course, is that a lot of people don't know what their max heart rate is. Like, you could run hard, doing a hill workout, or maybe you're running mile repeats on the track or something, and your heart rate monitor on, you're like, oh man, I'm working hard, that just sucks, it's hard. But you're probably not hitting 100%. You're probably getting maybe 95, 97. You have to be cranking really, really hard to hit 100% and figure out what that number is. Like, I don't think I've ever been wearing a heart rate monitor when I've hit 100%, because I usually don't wear it during races. But it would have to be an all-out sort of time trial race to really get 100%. They say you could run like a half-mile all-out on a track, rest 5 minutes, then do it again. You might get pretty close to 100%, but most people haven't fought through maybe enough pain to actually get to 100%. So you don't know what that, it's kind of this arbitrary number that's out there. And then the other formula for that is 220 minus your age. Well, that doesn't work a lot too, because it's genetic variations between individuals. And so what we see with the 220 minus your age formula for determining maximum heart rate, now that's a quantity, 220 subtract your age, max heart rate theoretically, is there's a lot of variation in that. And of course, as you get older, your maximum heart rate is going down. And so, you know, back to the max heart rate testing, people are like, oh, I got a Vo2max test in the lab. I was running on a treadmill. They made it go up and speed up, and I'm going all out for, you know, 10 minutes or whatever. I've actually never had a Vo2max test, ironically, since this channel is named after the term Vo2max. But, you know, you're in a hot, stuffy lab. You got a tube stuffed in your mouth, maybe they're measuring your heart rate. Maybe you don't perform at your best doing that. So maybe you really didn't hit your Vo2max very well. Maybe you didn't hit 100% max heart rate. So still don't know what your 100% max heart rate is. Well, what we found as coaches over the years, Sandy and I, reading a lot of books, especially Jack Daniel's Distance Running Formula, highly recommended book. He's got these VDOT tables, is that you could kind of extrapolate pace on a flat running surface in good conditions with your fitness and other relative intensities and have that correspond with heart rate numbers that you could relate to. So I guess what I'm saying is it's all relative. It's relative to what, you know, your goal half marathon pace, let's say, is close to your tempo run pace. Your goal 10K pace is close to lactate threshold pace, LT. Threshold is what Jack Daniels calls it. Well, if you go out and do a 20-minute tempo run and you pace it well in good conditions and you get a good heart rate reading on that, subjectively maybe you said, oh, you know what, I was going about 85%, I could have sped up, you know, I was a 2-2 breathing pattern, 2 inhales, 2 exhales per every 2 steps, or no, 1 inhale, 1 exhale every 2 steps, sorry. So pretty steady rate, high anaerobic rate. I was starting to just feel a little bit of burn of lactic acid. I was right on my threshold. You take your heart rate average for that 20-minute tempo run, you'll have a pretty good idea probably about what your lactate threshold heart rate is, and you could extrapolate from that as saying, hey, you know, that was about 85%, 88% of maybe what my theoretical maximum heart rate is. That kind of thing might be probably more accurate than if you were trying to just calculate your maximum heart rate. So a lot of it is by feel, and with lactate threshold or tempo run training, is what we call it, it's really an art to being able to feel that intensity as well. So a lot of times, you know, I'm wearing the heart rate monitor, I have mile splits going. I don't look at them all the time, especially on easy day running or long runs, but in a targeted workout where I'm going for pace and a specific intensity at the same time, especially with marathon training on the road, you could do that. And it's almost, I think, probably more accurate because you're getting an idea of what your velocity, what your pace is at a certain heart rate, at a relative heart rate that you could relate to. And maybe, you know, I don't know if my max heart rate really is 190. I'm starting to think it's probably lower than that. But I know at 170, lactate threshold is starting to really kick. I know at 175, I'm getting close to Vo2max. Probably 180 would be closer to 100%. But, you know, other people look at Strava and they say, oh, you know, you did an 18-mile long run and your average heart rate was 144. Strava said it was an extreme suffer score. He said it was a big suffer fest. I had a lot of points in the red. Well, it wasn't really that hard of a workout. I was going steady on an 18-miler last week, and my average heart rate was 144. It's pretty low for me. It wasn't like super easy, but you know, I could still talk a decent amount. It wasn't even close to what Sandy and I call it up tempo even, maybe for a couple miles in there. But and that's kind of where the zone training and you know, inaccuracies with the zone training gets messed up. So I took some notes on that. Strava said Strava breaks it up into endurance, moderate, tempo, threshold, anaerobic. Well, tempo is a range of 159 to 175 for me. It's a huge range. It's too big of a range, that's the problem. And to say tempo, threshold, anaerobic, I think is really confusing because the terminology gets screwed up there. And tempo would be synonymous with zone 3, what they call zone 3. The problem is 159 to 175 beats per minute, huge heart rate variation. And if you go to our website, again, website plug, sagerunning.com, we do have a PDF on there of our intensity spectrum chart, and it breaks it down into different intensity zones based on perceived overall effort, but also estimated percentages of max heart rate, but also relative paces. So, you know, Jack Daniel's lactate threshold tempo run training, for a lot of people, it's going to be between 10K pace, 10K race pace, and half marathon race pace. If you've run a lot of those types of races, you've trained well for them, you've run one in good conditions on a flat course, you have a pretty good idea of what pace that's going to be. And hopefully it's a moving target. Hopefully it's progressing. So hopefully it's progressing over time. It is always a moving target. So that's another thing, is you're increasing your fitness, your velocity, your pace maybe at lactate threshold. Your pace at Vo2max is coming down. And a lot of that's coming through improvements in running economy. You should become more efficient. You have a better running form. You're wearing lighter shoes. You have a faster cadence. You've got aerobic adaptations. You could breathe better basically. So your lactate threshold pace is coming down. You shuttle lactate around a lot faster. You're not tying up, you're not going anaerobic as fast. And that's the whole goal of training. It's a moving target. So it's both an art and a science. And again, with the misconceptions, Moth method, 180 minus your age, and then you make adjustments, plus or minus 5 from there. Again, you're taking an arbitrary number, you're taking your age. There's not as many factors for individual variation. And if we're worried about fat burning, well, fat burning, easy aerobic zone, you want to be any run between 55 to 70, 75% of max heart rate or perceived effort is going to be a pretty nice, almost entirely all aerobic stimulus. And if you're running over 30 minutes, if you're running pretty high mileage, you're running relaxed, you're going to be burning a lot of fat. That's kind of about what aerobic easy mileage base building is all about. And as you periodize your training, as you increase intensity and start specific workouts like the lactate threshold, which are probably the key workouts, as well as some shorter speed training. I call them running economy workouts, but higher end, maybe like 400 meter repeats, quarter mile repeats on a track at 3K pace. So still pretty short efforts, but a lot faster than it's basically speed training, but it's an aerobic stimulus. You might get heart rate spikes up over 90%, but they're only for a minute at a time or 30 seconds at a time. So it's only at the very end of the last 200 meters going around the track, and then you take adequate rest, so you're not stressing yourself out too much. It's not an anaerobic workout where you're building up a lot of lactic acid. Whereas if you were sprinting 400 meter repeats and taking a controlled short rest, that could get very acidic very fast and be very painful. So I guess in closing here, heart rate training I think is a very useful tool. You have to be careful with what zones you're in. You have to be careful with how you calculate your maximum heart rate, and not make too many assumptions on that based on what you read or what zone configurations you see. And go to our website, sagerunning.com. You could get our pace intensity spectrum chart. It explains it in terms that I've broken down with up-tempo, what an up-tempo run range is compared to what a tempo run or lactate threshold range is, then going into Vo2max. And it gives you examples of types of workouts as well as relative race paces, so you could kind of get a feel for that, because the pace you run at these intensities is just as important as the actual intensity itself if you're training for a half marathon or marathon on a road especially. So check that out. Thanks again for all the subscriptions, all the views, and for sharing this. If you like this video, I really do appreciate all the comments and feedback, and sure to stay tuned for the diet and nutrition video training talk coming out, as well as the cycling footage. Hopefully we'll put together a video in the coming days. But thanks again for all the support. I hope your fall's off to a great start with your training and racing, and feel free to comment below for future training talk topics as well as vote. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it, and stay tuned for more Vo2max Productions.